All right, it is 4 o'clock on March the 7th. We have a special meeting of the Board of Directors of the Bastrop Economic Development Corporation. I believe we have a quorum here. Yes, we do. Call to order here. The Bastrop EDC Board reserves the right to convene into executive session at any time during the meeting regarding any agenda item in compliance with the Texas Open Meeting Act of Chapter 551 Government Code. Number 2, do we have any public comments today?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, very good. Then we're going to move right into 3.1, discussion and possible action on an update on the Gummy Bear Project, also known as the Howard Designs, LLC, regarding their performance agreement with the BEDC. So, hey, Kevin, there we go. So, oh, yeah. And we now have Kevin Plunkett here showing up. Hey, Kevin. All right. Does the BEDC staff want to start this? And then we're going to ask to come up and talk a little bit about it.
There we go. I believe that the contract is in the packet, and there were some questions from the board as to where we are with that project. And I think from here, I'm going to let Bill and Angela will actually coordinate where we are exactly with the project from a timeline standpoint and what kickers are in place according to the contract.
Angela, you want to go for it?
Okay, so this agreement was entered into and it was finalized in October 2020. It consisted of about 5 different pieces, so it's a little convoluted if you guys had a chance to go through it. The beginning, and the owner is here tonight, so correct me if I'm wrong, please. The first piece would have been 292 Industrial Boulevard, which is not in the industrial park, okay? It's over in the old industrial area. And that was to get that piece ready for Water Street Millworks to move into, right? And then you switched gears and worked on the piece of property you purchased from DigTech, 402 Technology Drive, which is in the industrial park. And then the last piece was taking the old Water Street Millworks building at the corner of Water Street and Chestnut Street, and you're going to turn that into retail, restaurant, cafe, something along those lines. Retail. Art gallery. Okay. So did I summarize that well enough for everybody? Okay, do I have any questions before I get off? Okay.
So do you have an opportunity just to summarize how things are going and how the project's going overall for you?
Sure. We started with obviously moving everything and remodeling 292 Industrial. Ran into a whole bunch of snags there. Inconsistency in communication with the city regarding the permitting process and what we needed to permit and how we needed to build it based on firewalls necessary and how those firewalls needed to be built and insulation and lots of me micromanaging and doing the research to then tell the city what the codes actually said and what I needed to do versus spending, I think in excess of about $35,000 was requested for me to spend for studies that ended up not being necessary. That obviously slowed down that project dramatically. Still ended up having to build a 3-hour firewall in the middle of a 6,000 square foot building that has 2 huge metal bay doors that basically are the exit, but got to have a 3-hour firewall between that's basically creating 2 rooms a little bit about this size that have a 3-hour firewall in between them and a big, huge roll-up door. Because we had to do that. So we did that, we built the wall, we got the building finished, we moved Water Street Millworks, we facilitated that whole move, took all of their equipment offline, moved it all, put it all back online for them, got them operational. I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this question, but I think they've been operational for 9 months or so. And since they've been there, they've increased their staff 3. They've added 3 more people to their staff, and they're fully operational. Now, that building has been requested to have the certificate of occupancy, and we've had people come out and do inspections, but I don't know where that actually stands. When we started the process, the MyGov website worked really well, and my purchasing agent had the access to that and was doing all the requests for all the permits. Somewhere in the last 5 months or so, that stopped working, and the credentials wouldn't let her access it, and the city couldn't give her a solution as to how to fix it, so she just started calling the planning department directly. So a lot of those requests since then have just been done over the phone because she hasn't been able to get her access back into the system. And that was the solution she was given by the staff. So that's where that happened. Over in the industrial park, we went through the process of designing out that building. Went a little bit smoother there as far as getting the permits and the plans done. Built that out. So we added, I think we added 2,500 square feet to that building, and got it fully functional and operational in January. Final approvals were requested, I think the first week of February. And when the inspector, so we asked for the final inspection for our CO at the same time that we contacted the state for our disability, American Disability Act review. The American Disability people came like 3 days later, checked it all off, and we're good to go there. But the city sent the inspector to do the final, and when he got there, he told us, I'm not contracted with the city to do the fire inspection. I told them that when I was there. They know that I can do this, so I've looked it over for the fire inspection, and I can approve it for the fire inspection, but I'm currently not contracted to do that. So that's where that stands. He came, he did part of the final inspection, but I never got any word after that as to whether or not the city actually engaged with him for that, or if there's some other entity that's supposed to come do that. But that's where that stands. So since February, somewhere around February 6th or 7th, we've been waiting for something to tell us we're done. But every inspection up until that point we passed. For the most part, it's been that same inspector who's been coming out and doing those reviews. So that's where that stands. We were operational and have been operational since the first of the year. So that building's finished. Downtown, and if I don't know exactly where the contract may have gotten construed, but it was always the strategy from the beginning that the downtown building would be the last piece of the puzzle because it's generating the least amount of jobs. And the idea was to spend the time and the money creating the jobs first and then build that building out because it's a new entity, it's a new business, and it'll have very, very low numbers, maybe one employee besides my wife in the beginning. So we were working on the plans for that building, and we were going through the remediation. So we got the permit to do the remediation, and we went through the process, and that took quite a while to get that all sorted out and done. But lead, asbestos, all had to be removed from that building. Y'all may have remember seeing it kind of tinted and cocooned, and there was a big hazmat trash can behind it, but that's all been done. So the building is clean, and it's gutted as far as like we can see what we need to do. Engineers have finished their reports. Drawings are done, but we did a pre-bid before we submitted it to the city, and our budget was a little bit blown just based on the current market and all of the material costs. So I challenged the builder to go back and give me kind of a, not a bare bones, but a operation, something that I could get a CO and still be operational, but maybe not have all the little bells and whistles that we originally wanted. I'm supposed to have those back this week, and the intention there is then to submit that and start that project. Originally, when we first started this conversation back in 2020, the intention was to open that gallery in May of this year. We're obviously probably going to be behind on that, but based on everything that's been happening with material costs and the other two projects going over their timelines, and then us also just having, from a business standpoint, COVID affected us as a business the most in the entire part. Since COVID started, January and February, we were shut down in a way that we hadn't been as it ran through every department in our facility, 3 or 4 people at a time, and just shut one room, one department down, and then the next department down, and then the next department down. So that obviously took a lot of focus to keep the business moving there too. So that's where we stand right now.
And just a brief summary on this, there's part of that condition was also the spending amount to be reached. I would assume that you've reached that or exceeded that estimated investment.
What is that estimated investment?
I think it was 2 point something million overall.
Right, it's divided out, so the 1.15 million for 402 Technology Drive,
Yeah.
okay. 900,000 for Chestnut and Water Street, which you're still working on.
Right.
We will exceed that
Right.
when
Okay.
we finish it, yeah.
And I don't see a monetary amount on the 292.
And, okay.
Yeah, so the numbers on.
2.05 million, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's where I had, was the overall total was about 2.1. Okay. And again, I mean, it's
Yes.
difficult to hear the stories of how it's coming, but again.
We've
from-
definitely exceeded those numbers, and will continue to exceed those
But
numbers.
knowing how it's going and, can only state experience as well, the effects of the MyGov, as well as the inspections, as well as COVID, as well as abatement of asbestos and working with the state and all that, hasn't been the easiest of a few years. But I appreciate the fact that you're moving ahead with it and still progressing with it and plan to complete it as well.
Yeah, definitely, and just to give you a couple of statistics that probably do matter for y'all, the Water Street Millworks has increased their staff by almost 50%, and we've added, at the time when this all started, we had 26 full-time employees, we have 38 right now. We're still hiring, so we probably have 3 open positions as of right now, but that will probably continue to increase as we add capacity now that we are in the new building, so.
I have two questions, and I think they'll be fairly easy. One of them may be for Mr. Gossett or Ms. Ryan, is how are we confirming that the investment's been made? What's the paper trail on that?
I'm keeping a file here with all of the documents in it. They've sent me everything from pictures to closing documents. I mean, every time it's time for another one, they send me the documentation.
Yeah, I mean,
on
if
the
you want me
previous.
to get y'all an updated itemization, I can, but the purchase price of the 2 buildings alone almost exceeds those numbers
Okay.
without
I just
any
want to make sure
investment.
we've got all the paperwork together for
Yeah.
that. And then you had made some statements about what the plan was from the beginning, which that's fine. My question is, when we signed this document, when did you anticipate the classroom being available? Because I'm seeing that the $205,000 was paid on October 23rd, and it's with respect to and so I didn't know when the 10 years starts, is I guess what I'm asking.
So the 10-year would start once the CO is received at 402 Technology for the classroom space at that location. Yeah.
And I've been communicating with them like every couple of months about where that was and when we needed to have that ready. And, ACC changed their mind on what they wanted to do there. And then we've kind of been up in the air as to what's actually going to happen. But we've been ready as far as just waiting for the CO since the first week of February. So, I mean, basically that space is available whenever y'all decide what y'all want to put there.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
Are we bumping up on a deadline or something that we need to extend, or
I was
I couldn't find.
reviewing the contract. There's not a
Yeah.
whole lot of deadlines in
Right,
here.
I thought
And
there were, but-
Mr. Howard commented before the meeting started, there's some things that maybe it could have a little bit more clarity. As long as we're all on the same page, I think that's fine. What I had been concerned about specifically was I didn't know if you had incurred any costs that you intended to come back to the board, like if you had known then what you know now, would we have changed an investment? I didn't know if there was, if we were up to speed on all of the documentation. It'd just been a while since the board had gotten an update on the overall project. And what I didn't want to have happen was get behind and have different expectations between the board and you, Mr. Howard, and us be like, oh, if we had only talked about it, we could have made an amendment. So that was the
let me
point.
clarify a couple things there that I think might help. So the only cost overrun that I'm concerned about and that was communicated to me that we might come back to the EDC came from Trey. And it was because when we originally started that process, we met with the fire marshal, Eric, is that his name? And there was some question about the number of people that would be able to be in that building with or without a sprinkler system. And he threw out a number, it was in 100, 200, something big, and I said, if we limit the number of people who can come into it and put the placard on the wall that says, 85 people or whatever, can we not have to require the sprinkler system? And he said, yeah, that would probably work. So I went under the impression from the very beginning that we would be able to, because it's a retail gallery and we're not going to be a restaurant, we're not going to do all that, that we wouldn't have to put a sprinkler system in. Then this, 8 months ago, Trey got involved, kind of helping try to see what was going on, and he said, "Oh no, you have to put a sprinkler system in," and it was his suggestion. It came from him. He said, "This is a quality or a life safety issue, and we'll just go back to the board and get that funded." Those were his words. He said, "We'll figure out what that needs to cost, and then we'll go back to the board and we'll get them to fund it." Then he also said that he was going to find a project manager, or not a project manager, a project quoter, somebody that the city was going to pay for. And he also said that he would go back and get that covered through the EDC or somehow. And that project quoter was going to come and look at what we wanted to do for the gallery and put a budget together, including that sprinkler system. And then that would be something that would go back to the EDC board for that overrun because of it being a life safety issue that he felt was important. That never, nobody ever contacted me. Nobody ever came to the shop to talk to me about doing that. And I haven't heard anything else about it. So I've continued to move forward under the assumption that I don't need that sprinkler system, and I'm not going to request it. But if that's something that y'all want to do and that was directed by the city in some way, but all of that came to me through Trey, and those conversations were had. And I did mention to the EDC staff 6 or 8 months ago that there might be something that I would come back for if indeed that was a requirement that changed from what we started and the city or the EDC felt like that was a worthy investment that they wanted to participate in. So I don't know where any of that stands, but that's the only part of this that I know about that could be in question.
Well, just a curious question. You said that you talked with the fire marshal, I believe is what term you used?
Yeah.
And that the fire marshal gave you the indication that there really wasn't a need as long as you had a placard up there, correct?
Yes.
And then you talked with Trey, and he said, no, he believes it's a life safety situation.
He used some term like that.
Okay, I guess my question is, who has the authority to state that you have to have that? Is that a planning department regulation, or is that a fire marshal regulation? So who in your, I'm sure you've tried to find out who that is, but
my
who has the
assumption
authority?
is that Trey was just speaking as Trey, as an employee of the city, not necessarily speaking as an authority, and that it was his opinion that was something that we would want to do, which was why he suggested that they would get this quoter person, I don't know the term he used, that would come in for a fee that the EDC would cover. They would look at what I was trying to do, and they would quote in those parts that may be what he considered life safety. I don't know where that was coming from, and when it didn't come to fruition and there was no more follow-up, I feel like the last time we talked about that, he said, I'm going to have this person contact you, and then we'll move forward from there. But again, I've been building out the other 2 buildings and moving forward, and so my understanding of the contract was that when I had approved building permits and received that 3rd draw, that then that timeline to finish that building would start. And so I've kind of been thinking in the back of my head, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, which obviously is coming pretty quickly, but I don't know the answer to that question. And I would think that the fire marshal would be the one.
Well, Chair Spencer, the
yes.
city manager and the fire chief are in the back of the room, so it might be good to give them an
Fire chief.
opportunity.
Yeah, we'd love to have an opportunity for either one of you to come up and maybe get us a little clarification on that, because it may be a cost impact to us, it may be a scheduling impact to Mr. Howard here.
Specifically, your question on who has authority, I'm thinking, not that Mr. Howard's not
I-
an
I-
expert on it.
No.
I understand there's a specific question, but there's a lot that's been said over the last few minutes, and what we would appreciate the opportunity to do is create a complete, comprehensive response to the last several minutes of what you've heard Mr. Howard say about his experience over the last several months. Doesn't track my understanding of his experience over the last several months. And I understand that you guys have some other agenda items that you'll take on this evening. And I think I don't need that much time to create a complete response. So the way this works, the fire marshal does have some responsibilities relative to authority over the fire code. The fire marshal that was referred to earlier in the conversation doesn't work here anymore. Chief Rosales, who serves as the fire marshal, and that other person served in the capacity of deputy fire marshal at that time. Chief Rosales is not up on the details here, but we can certainly get him up on those details. Mr. Job is the assistant city manager over community development. As such, he supervises the planning and development process for the city. I've been involved in conversations with Mr. Howard myself, where we've talked about how an outside consultant might be of some assistance here. And I'll say that I've been part of some discussion about what could at some point in the future become a recommendation to the EDC for funding, right? And there's been discussion about what that might look like. I understand, Mr. Job understands that we are in no way authorized to commit the EDC to anything. But I do think it's okay for us to have conversations with folks we're working with about what might be possible towards solving a problem. But I apologize that I'm not able to more completely address all of this, but I think if I have a few minutes, I can come up with a more complete answer, including to Mr. Howard's concerns about his experience with the online application system. So if that's okay, and if I can't get that done tonight, I promise we'll have a complete response to the board in short order. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I mean, obviously, the city's
I'm-
planning department was brought up in the conversation. It's only fair that you have the, to come back and say, your side of what it is. We're just trying to resolve this is all. It's
Absolutely.
not a,
Absolutely.
we're just trying to resolve
Yes,
this
sir.
thing. So,
Thank you.
great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments from anybody? Okay. Well,
Could I suggest we table this one and pick it back up after we, clear the rest of the agenda?
yeah, let's go ahead and table this number 3.1 for right now. Okay, I'm going to want to move to 3.4, and then afterwards we're going to go into executive session. So if we can bring up 3.4, discussion and possible action on paying off the remaining loan balance associated with 921 Main Street building.
Yeah, one of the things we've talked about, again, with the successful closure of the 921 building update, that was done with Angela and myself on Friday. The monies have transferred, and so the bank deposits should all be there, correct? So we're good there.
Checks in the mail?
No, actually, it's in there.
No, I think they refer to it as hard money.
Yeah, hard money. So out of that amount, There's a loan that we originally had with Roscoe Bank that had been really associated with this project, and early on we talked about closing that loan out. And so I think right now the loan, that percent is about a 4.9+% loan. It's just under 1.4 million a balance remaining on it. And as we had talked about over various times that when we sold the building that we would be able to finish that loan. And so all I'm asking for at this point is to go ahead and proceed and use the proceeds, partial of the proceeds from that, to close off that loan and go ahead and close it. Just to clarify, that loan is not a mortgage. It is based on sales tax revenue, so it's a revenue-based bond from Moscow.
So this would be to pay off the entire loan, so we'd just close it out?
That'd pay off the entire loan.
I assume it is, but is it our highest interest rate debt that we have out?
I believe it is. I don't remember the other one, the 2018 callable loan. I don't. Tracy, do you happen to know that interest rate? It's about the same. Yeah. And again, with that, the second opportunity would be to close off and close that loan, which is a callable loan as well. It's right out about $1 million. So from the proceeds from the building, we could actually close off both those loans. The savings of interest rate on the 2018 loan is right just under $250,000 worth of savings on interest rate on that one as well. And how we know now the current balances of cash is nothing or slightly above nothing. We don't get a lot of money based on that revenue, and we also have plenty of cash to execute the projects that we have going forth. So first of all, I would recommend closing off the Roscoe loan, and then second, I would recommend closing off the 2018 callable bond.
Okay. So Charlie, a question. We're only talking on 3.4 for the loan balance associated with 921. Can we include the other one, or that has to be on a different agenda item? Okay, just one point of clarification. Any other discussion on this point? I'd like to entertain a motion then to do that.
I make a motion that we approve closing on the 921 outstanding loan with Roscoe Bank for 921 Main Street.
Second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed? All right, it passes unanimously.
Chair, if you don't mind, staff would like to do a small little, really brief presentation about 921 to congratulate every single one of you and every person that it took to make all of this happen. As you guys know, really quick, we will run through this, just a visual of kind of where we started and where we are today. It, again, was a collective village effort to make all of this come together the way it has and turned into an absolutely stunning building. So once again, congratulations. The building is sold and we have succeeded on behalf of the community. So thank you. Thank you for your time, your effort, and support during this project.
Including Richard.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move into our executive session right now. We're going to move to 4.1. The Bastrop EDC Board of Directors will meet in a closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, to discuss the following. Number one, Section 551.004, Personnel Matters, discussion on Chief Executive Officer position. So time is 4:29 p.m. take any actions necessary related to the executive sessions noted herein. We don't have any actions coming out of that, so we're going to get back to section, sorry. Get this in. All right. So, section 3.2, discussion and possible action on engaging a consultant to assist the BEDC in alignment with the City of Bastrop's economic development policy. So, with that, I would like to hear from Board Member Jen to give us kind of an update on what conversations you've had so far with Mr. Weathers.
So what I'd like to do is open for discussion the idea of bringing on a consultant, Steve Weathers. And the idea behind this consultant is as follows. The City of Bastrop and the Bastrop Economic Development Corporation are basically at a crossroads. There has been a lot of growth, a lot of economic expansion in the city over the past number of years, and at the same time, the vision, the goals, the development of strategies, roles, and responsibilities have also fallen a little bit out of alignment. So the idea of bringing on a consultant would the goal would be to bring the organizations together to come up with combined joint objectives and priorities. This would align to the policy which was approved by the City Council and actually be used as a guidepost. So with that in mind, some of the areas that would be explored are creating a strategic and economic alignment. Basically, what would we need to do to achieve that? So this is not the EDC creating this alignment. It's working with the City Council, working with the City Manager and others to actually bring this all together. In addition to that, we'd also talk about strategic planning, looking at the existing plan and coming again together to come up with a 5-year plan that everybody aligns to. In addition to that, coordination and accountability. This has been a little bit of a rough road. And so the idea is, with this consultant coming in, they're agnostic, they're not aligned to either organization, and the objective here would be to get alignment in how we're going to be doing this. And then, so with that in mind, we would use a project management methodology called a Racy Matrix. Basically, what a Racy Matrix does is assign areas of responsibility. Who is responsible for a particular area? It could be the city staff and the EDC staff, for instance. Accountability would be the EDC board. Essentially, it comes to rest with the board. However, the city administration, the mayor, the city council, the economic development partners would also be a part of this. So that's where the consultant comes in, the consulting piece of the Racy Matrix. And then last but not least, our taxpayers. They are in the informed. They're basically given the information and able to understand what it is that we're doing here. So the next step with this would be to gain agreement that we want to actually bring on a consultant, develop a statement of work along these lines for review and consideration, and then once we gain alignment, then pursue how much this is going to cost, what the timeline, and whatever. So any questions?
Yeah, I think I like the approach, especially knowing that we have the direction and directive from the city and the policy that was established. That just to clarify that this would be based on that, and that would be the center point of the development of the recommendations.
That is exactly right. It would literally go point by point based on the policy.
Thank you.
Okay, give me your understanding of this create a 5-year City of Bastrop and EDC strategic plan. Just curious how you came up with the 5 years.
It could be longer or shorter. It was just an idea. So basically taking what we've got today, looking at it, and if a 3-year plan is what everybody would align to, or a 5-year plan, what everybody aligned to, that's what we would actually embark on. So I wanted to actually put a number on it so that way we could decide what is reasonable and feasible for the City of Bastrop.
I actually think, and kind of I'm not sure, I think it said a 5-year plan was in the policy that was approved. We'd have to go through the details, but there was clearly a long-term, and I think it actually had a 5-year, it may have even been a trigger in that.
Would this consultant also be responsible, or at least part of any search for a new ED, executive director?
That actually can be written into the statement of work. So the idea behind this is once we have this alignment established, now we are in a good place to actually actively search for a new director for the EDC. So with that in mind, essentially leveraging this consultant's network and bringing in viable candidates based on this new alignment, as well as what would fit, who would fit in well with this new alignment.
Thank you.
No, I think that would definitely be something to add on. So at this point, would it be good for you to continue the negotiations with him on that point and potentially bring in the city manager at least at some point before we get to the end?
Yeah, actually, that's what I was going to bring up as well, too. Good thought there. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see you continue on. If you need help with any of the other board members, officers, whatever, don't hesitate to reach out and ask us. But I would like to continue on and run this thread out so that we can get, I mean, this is just a straw man right now. It's just something to take a look at to go, oh, that's interesting. That kind of looks like what we're thinking about. So I'd like to go ahead and ask you to go ahead and continue on with that discussion with him. Maybe go ahead and float the idea with him about utilizing his networks to see if there's a way that he might be able to give us some insight into his networks of folks that he might have on there. Obviously, it's bringing it back to the board so we can have discussions about it, because at some point in time we're going to have to talk about what the cost is going to be, and I'm assuming he's the one that's going to come up with his time and materials cost and whatnot. We do understand that he doesn't live here, so there's going to be, there may very well be travel involved and, lodging and things like that. So we're just going to need to take that into consideration as far as, what we feel comfortable with. We can have the discussions later, but I would suggest you go ahead and continue on with that. Do we need a motion or anything like that, Charlie, to get that, to have her continue? Okay.
I'd also like to make the suggestion that maybe have Mr. Weathers visit with the city manager, because they may be able to come up with like the highest priority, and part of this exists, and let's work on that together. And so if they're Councilmember Plunkett's point, if they're working together from the beginning, it may make it go a lot smoother once that's established. And I'm very interested in him including in the search for a new director, whether that be he thinks he can do it utilizing his networks, or maybe he thinks we should use a search firm and one he's used successfully. Just kind of, I'm willing to pay him for his advice on how best to proceed. So, and I would let him have some latitude on what he might suggest for that.
Absolutely. We can't do this without the city manager and his involvement in the process. That's where the alignment comes from. So yes, actually, that is the plan, is before we get this to the pricing stage, we are all aligned in what's going to happen. In addition to that, there's timelines associated with it as well. So you're going to actually see dates, 90 days, 120 days, that type of activity. So it's going to be pretty detailed in terms of, I'm a big believer in pay in results. Okay, so, but again, we won't, city manager will absolutely be involved in those conversations. And again, until we all get aligned, we can't move forward. So.
Just one other comment. I would just like for you to pay particular attention to the timelines here. I noticed on the 5-year plan, again, it's just a straw man, but it seemed to be a little on the long side there.
Oh, yeah.
180 to 365. I'm not sure that would be the appropriate.
I already had
Okay.
similar conversation. I'm a little bit more streamlined, more like 30 days, 90 days.
Thank you.
Okay, so I saw that as well. And again, I cannot I cannot emphasize enough that the fact that everybody needs to come together is how this is successful. So if the economic board doesn't cooperate or the city manager doesn't cooperate, nothing will get done. It will not work. So the alignment is critical to that success. So again, we can't do it without either organization coming together.
A very good point, thank you. So we're pretty much all in agreement that this is the methodology we're going to employ?
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
great.
You had your light on. I didn't know if there was something else you wanted to say.
Okay. Yay, yay. All right. Well, excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. We will move on then to 3.4, and this is the one that I had requested. And I just want to read, just so that we all understand.
I think you need 3.3.
I'm sorry, 3.3, my fault there. 3.3, discussion and possible action on the roles and responsibilities of the BEDC subcommittee members. So I just want to take just a moment just to read the bylaws here, just so that we all understand what subcommittees are, what they do, and some of the responsibilities and none of the responsibilities that they have. So it falls under Section 8 of the bylaws. I believe it's the 10th rendition of the bylaws. Yeah, 10th Amendment bylaws. And it so states, the board may constitute from time to time committees of the board that are deemed necessary or appropriate. No such committee shall have independent authority to act for or in the stead of the board. And the only reason I bring this up is we have some newer members here, and I just want to make sure that we all understand that we've all been part of boards, we've all been part of subcommittees, we have tasks to complete, but at the end of the day, those tasks and the recommendations need to be brought to the board so that the board as a whole can take those recommendations and then act accordingly on it. So that's all I really want to say, is that there's nothing to act on here, there's nothing to, approve. It's already in the bylaws. I'm just making a friendly reminder that we have bylaws and we need to adhere to those bylaws. So.
And if I could I think those are tremendous points, and I'm just wanted to throw in as a reminder from a legal perspective that subcommittee should not expand its discussions regarding the ongoings of the subcommittee outside of an open meeting with the rest of the committee in order to stay in compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act.
Thank you. Very good point. Thank you. Okay. Well, we are finished with that.
Chair Spencer, I have a suggestion.
Yes.
It looks as though there's a really productive conversation going on, and we meet again in 2 weeks.
Yes.
So perhaps 3.1, I think it would be a good idea for the board to know the results of that productive discussion, and we can get an update at our next meeting.
Okay. Well, then.
Yeah, agreed, especially if there's no urgent decisions that need to come from it.
Exactly.
Okay, well then we'll continue with the tabling of that motion, and we'll have that brought up on the next agenda as an agenda item on the next regularly scheduled board meeting then. So is there any other items or discussion that anybody would like to make?
Move to adjourn.
Do we have a second on that? All right. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? All right, meeting adjourned at 5:03 p.m.